Hey everyone, good afternoon. I'm Rob Simone. I'm the REIT sector head, and again, kind of morphing into a Bitcoin analyst here at Hedgeye. Really excited to be joined today by Zach and Lili from Foundation Devices. So just by way of background, a bunch of you have reached out to me as you kind of figured out I was the one of the resident Bitcoiners here at Hedgeye. I got to know Lili via Twitter, and then Zach, who's the CEO of Foundation, and a bunch of you reached out and wanted to have a discussion about Bitcoin self-custody and hardware wallets, which is obviously a very important part of the ecosystem. And I couldn't think of anyone better than Zach and Lili to come on and talk about Foundation and what they're doing in the space, given how important they are and becoming to that corner of the Bitcoin world. So Zach, Lili, welcome. Why don't you guys tell us about your backgrounds and how you wound up at Foundation and kind of what you're working on?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us, Rob. So I'll start. So I'm Zach Herbert. I'm co-founder and CEO at Foundation. We started Foundation in 2020 to bring more user-friendly and just better designed Bitcoin self-custody to the market. I personally have been working in the space full-time since 2017 and have been a Bitcoiner since 2013. So I've been using all these different tools and self-custodying my Bitcoin for a long time, since before there was even such thing as a hardware wallet.
Nice. How about you, Lili? How did you find your way to Foundation? And what do you do? And what do you do for them?
So I'm currently head of business development here at Foundation Devices. I have a traditional finance background. So prior to entering the crypto space full time, I was working at investment banks. And then I moved to portfolio management, where I manage portfolios for the ultra high net worth clientele. That was where I found Bitcoin. It was late 2018, and I was looking for a way to hedge exposure to the equity markets because I was able to see that bonds didn't make a cut after the Federal Reserve tried to raise rates. I pitched the idea while I was there. It was a little bit ahead of its time, and I got some backlash for it. But I started stacking Bitcoin on my own. I was learning about self-custody and privacy tools around the way, and I realized I really wanted to work in the space full time. So I actually entered this space in Bitcoin mining at first, and then I moved into Foundation because I really have this drive to educate people on self-custody and sovereign Bitcoin use. And financial freedom now is a lot more than just wealth preservation and inflation protection. It includes being able to transact privately and transact at will whenever you want and wherever you want.
No, that's great. And the three of us, we spoke ahead of time, and I mentioned to you guys that in many cases, as you know, people are kind of starting from zero when it comes to this area. So I don't know, Zach, first of all, what is self-custody, and why, to Lili's point, why is it so important right now? Maybe more important than ever before, and growing.
Definitely. So self-custody means that you are actually storing your Bitcoin yourself. So rather than relying on a trusted third party, a custodian, such as Coinbase, for example, is probably the most popular example, or any other exchanges across the world, self-custody means that you're actually physically storing your own Bitcoin. If you already are familiar with the difference between, let's say, paper or gold and physical gold, it's kind of a similar concept where if you're storing Bitcoin on an exchange, it's more of like an IOU, where you can request your Bitcoin be withdrawn from an exchange. But if you're storing Bitcoin yourself in self-custody, it means that you're actually storing it yourself. And that means that your keys are living on something like a phone, or they could be living on something like a hardware wallet, which is what we make. And we actually make both hardware wallet and a mobile app that's coming out. So why it's so important is because Bitcoin is all about sovereignty. Bitcoin is all about having control over your own money, your own financial freedom. And so if you're trusting another party to store it for you, well, it can be more convenient, especially if you're just getting started and getting into the space and learning about how Bitcoin works. You're really trading off that convenience for control. And if something goes wrong, it means that the only way you have your own Bitcoin is if you are storing it for yourself. And as the world is getting crazier, and it has gotten pretty crazy even in just the last few weeks, but it's been going towards that trend for a long time, there's nothing like the certainty of knowing that you're storing your Bitcoin for yourself and that you're in control of your own money. Probably unless you've been storing physical gold, it might be the first time that you've ever been really in control of your money.
Sure. And, we talked about this, the concept of, similar to gold in many respects, but in a more decentralized way, Bitcoin being a digital bearer asset. And, we know what keys are, but could you guys, just for the audience, talk about the concept of keys? Like, I'm pretty sure that a fair number of folks may not know what public-private key cryptography even is, or like what the difference is between the two sides, and also like what actually resides on the physical device when when you pull your keys off the exchange, just so people understand like how that works. Zach or yeah, sure.
yeah, sure. So basically, Bitcoin is a little different than what you might think in terms of like what you're actually storing on your device, like your phone or your hardware wallet. So a lot of people think that you're physically like storing the Bitcoin themselves on something like a hardware wallet, but what you're really storing are private keys that allow you to spend that Bitcoin. Essentially, they give you a claim to what the Bitcoin blockchain, or another way to say it is like the Bitcoin ledger, says that you have. So, you have a public key, which references the public address at which you can receive your Bitcoin. Then you have your private key, and that's actually stored, with yourself if you're storing it on, in self-custody on a phone or on a hardware wallet. And if you have that private key, then you're actually able to go and spend that Bitcoin.
Yeah, and maybe so this may be helpful for folks who haven't been around the space that long. But Lili or Zach, this was really born out of the what happened with Mt. Gox way back when. Like, some of us remember that and how traumatic that was. In addition to privacy and self-sovereignty, there's also a security element to it, right? So I don't know, could you guys talk about that a little bit? Like, and you kind of started to touch on it, but to me, it's all about like eliminating a central point of failure in this, and what you're effectively would be doing is relying on a third party, to your point. But I don't know, just speak to that a little bit. I think it's an important part of the history here to give people context.
Yeah, I can comment on this. So if you look at like what was said in the Bitcoin white paper by Satoshi, he said, this is peer-to-peer digital cash, and we are attempting to eliminate third parties. The Bitcoin Genesis block literally says banks on brink of bailout, or Federal Reserve on brink of bailout for banks, and that's poking fun at these third parties that people can't rely on them anymore. And if you really like take your security seriously, you need to opt for something that you control. Part of Bitcoin's value proposition is that it is a bearer asset. And a bearer asset is meant to protect you in cases where, you need to flee, or you need to transact without going to that third party. You need to transact quickly, and you need to transact without friction. Because if you don't have that ability, you're compromising on like the properties of Bitcoin. Like you're also giving up that security by relying on someone else to hold your keys for you. And Bitcoin, it does introduce this element of responsibility. Like, you have the responsibility to hold your own keys, but you're also getting in return like the freedom to transact like when you choose to.
Mm-hmm. And this
one thing I'd add.
Oh, sorry, Zach, go for it. Sorry.
Yeah, just because you mentioned Mt. Gox, I think just one thing that is just held up time and time again. It was a
nightmare.
Exactly. There's always exchange hacks. Exchanges are hacked almost every single year. There's always, you can just Google like a Bitcoin exchange hack or crypto exchange hack, and you can look back on the timeline. And I think Mt. Gox was I think 2013, right? So I think that was actually when I just got into the space. I thought it was so cool, and then everything crashed, for multiple years after that. But this happens all the time. It could be an external hack. It could be someone internal at the exchange just figures out a way to steal the funds and just disappears. I mean, we've seen that in the last couple of years as well, where the CEO of the exchange just is gone, right? And the money is gone. And so this just keeps happening. It obviously, there's better practices now. A lot of people used to get SIM swapped back in the day, where someone would actually contact your cell phone carrier and say that they're you and take control of your phone number and then use that to get into the exchange and steal your coins. But now there's all these better protections. There's, multi-factor authentication and, IP address limitations and all these ways where, exchanges are trying to be more secure. But it doesn't matter because all the time, there's thefts and losses of coins. And so, sure, there's insurance and there's, ways where you can maybe get those assets back if they're lost. But I believe the Mt. Gox creditors are still waiting to get their money back. And we're approaching the 10-year anniversary next year. And so it's really important to think about, when you're storing and securing your own Bitcoin, it's important to think about and know about the history here because history repeats itself. And the best thing you can do for yourself and for the health of the Bitcoin network overall is to store your own Bitcoin yourself so that, if there's millions of people doing that, then there's no honeypot, there's no central place where an attacker can target and really easily get to it. They would have to go person to person, and that's, exponentially more difficult.
Yeah, and this is I think this is super important because, and you hit on it, those claims from Mt. Gox to the extent they are able to be paid out, they're not being paid out in Bitcoin, they're being paid out in fiat. So, it's gone, your Bitcoin's just gone. And so I really believe for your quote unquote, deep hodl stack, so to speak, it's really critical not to put yourself in a position where that could happen. Or even in the case of GBTC, we talk at Hedgeye a lot about, because we're a macro research shop. So there are times where, right now, by the way, the firm's call is to be effectively short Bitcoin and other digital assets. But one of the things that I've come to adopt for myself is, to the extent you do that, similar to gold, it may make sense to have your stack of gold physical in your basement or in a vault somewhere, or your stack of Bitcoin off the exchange, and then use the paper vehicles to trade if you want to do so. I personally, don't necessarily do that. I know other Bitcoiners don't. But if GBTC loses their Bitcoin, the only thing that they're going to be able to do, if at all, is pay you out in fiat. So anyway. But there's another, so maybe I'll let you guys talk about this, but you hinted at it early on in the discussion. We've also seen some very recent examples why this subject is extremely important, namely in Canada and also in Ukraine. I don't know, I would love to hear your guys' perspective, both Zach and Lili, on why those two cases are bringing this to the surface as to why it's maybe more important than ever.
Yeah, I think Bitcoin represents a hedge against government irresponsibility. I mean, as you saw in Canada, there were innocent users who were flagged for donating to a cause that they believed in. In this case, it was the Canadian truckers. Mm-hmm. So what happened was they flagged addresses of people who used the exchanges to donate. And then they found these people from their records, and they froze their fiat bank accounts. So there were people on this, in Canada on the streets, they couldn't buy gas, they couldn't buy groceries because they didn't have any cash on hand, and their bank accounts were completely shut off. I think that also is a huge ad for why you should hold your own keys, because then you have Bitcoin in your pocket, you have it at home, you can access it, you can trade it with someone and get cash, or you can transact with it yourself. I mean, we can't, they showed us we cannot rely on them to be objective in how we can use our own money. It's not just the Canadians, it's also the Russian citizens who are also locked out of their accounts.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Zach. Yep.
Yeah, I was going to say with regard to the Ukraine and Russia, I think there's a couple areas and examples that we've seen in the last couple of weeks that make it really clear that storing Bitcoin for yourself is actually far more advantageous than even storing something else like gold or cash physically. We've seen examples of Ukrainians at a scale, just an unprecedented scale in modern history, fleeing the country, fleeing a war zone, and you just take what you can take with you. We saw some examples and some images were going viral on Twitter in the last few days of Ukrainian diplomats trying to leave with millions of dollars of assets in a suitcase or multiple
suitcases of money. Yeah.
Yeah, you can look at those pictures.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm not advocating for this, but I'm not advocating for fleeing with millions of dollars and so on.
Well, hopefully we never need to, but if you do,
exactly,
yeah,
exactly. And in the suitcases, you have bundles of cash. You have multiple dozens of gold bars of different sizes. That compared to being able to have your Bitcoin on your phone or on a hardware wallet that's in your pocket or your backpack or something like that, it's just an enormous difference in terms of portability. And if times get scary, right? If situations get dangerous, being able to have immediate access, liquid access to your funds in Bitcoin at a moment's notice that you can bring across a border physically is really important. Also, though, it's not just about bringing it physically, it's about being able to send it without restrictions. So even if your traditional bank accounts, as Lili mentioned, are frozen for some reason, if you have control of your own Bitcoin private keys, you can go ahead and you can send money, you can send transactions, you can continue to buy groceries and pay your bills and support your family, even if something is going wrong. And it doesn't necessarily have to mean that you're being targeted either. A lot of times it might be easy to say, well, this person donated to an illegal cause, so they deserve to be completely frozen from their assets. But it could even be like what the images we saw to Russia, where there were lines for the ATM stretching, hundreds of people long, where you have to wait all day to withdraw your money from the ATM, where there's limits on withdrawals. I mean, that kind of thing can happen here, right? That's not something that is only exclusive to a war zone or a highly sanctioned economy. Bank runs can happen, anytime a population loses confidence in, the economy or the banking system. And it is kind of easy to picture that, in Western countries today, we could be on a trajectory towards something like that. So knowing that you don't have to line up, at the ATM, knowing that you have some Bitcoin that you store for yourself is a really powerful concept. And I don't know if it's something that we've ever really had before as humanity, because with gold, you have to physically, break it into pieces. You have to physically validate it. With Bitcoin, it's just cryptographically validated automatically for you with whatever wallet software or hardware you're using, and you can easily move it and you can easily send it as needed.
Yeah, I mean, I'm personally really excited let me rephrase that. It's an unfortunate situation in Ukraine, and it's a human tragedy, right? And no one ever wishes or wants for that, obviously. But what is going to be interesting, I think, in the coming months and years is hearing the stories about the people who may have previously tried to take their gold across the border and had it confiscated, versus now maybe not as many as we would like, but had 12 words in their head and were able to take their life savings with them. It's going to be interesting. It's basically like an advertisement for this technology and why it's so important. And I personally think we're going to hear more about it. So I'm fascinated to hear it. And actually, so this is another topic we talked about, and maybe where you guys really, really come in from foundation. I thought it would be interesting to talk about the different options that are out there: hot, cold wallets, physical drives, what you guys are doing, what's the the menu of options out there for folks if they wanted to take advantage of self-custody?
Yeah, so there are basically two big classes of wallets. There's hot wallets and there are cold wallets. Hot wallets are connected to the internet. They usually come, on mobile devices or in desktop versions. Cold wallets, your private keys sit offline and they are not connected to the internet. Some cold wallets do connect to the computer and interact with the computer that way. Our wallet does not, so it never touches the computer. Your keys are always offline. When you get a cold wallet that is completely offline, you have to have a hot wallet to pair with it to communicate with the device, in our case, the passport. So we created an app. It's called the Envoy mobile app. It is a basic Bitcoin wallet that allows users to send, receive, and boost transactions, as well as let them connect to the passport and manage their funds. They can manage multiple accounts. And the reason we did this was because we wanted to make the self-custody experience very seamless. We didn't want to make it very confusing. I mean, there are lots of products out there. There are lots of wallets out there. and some of them are very hard to use, or there's a lot of friction in onboarding. With Envoy, it comes out of the box. So you get your passport, you download the Envoy app, and you onboard from there. The instructions of how to connect your passport are there, how to send, receive, and use Bitcoin. Another thing to note too is specifically in the iPhone market, there really isn't a privacy-focused mobile app. With Envoy, you can connect, it connects to Tor automatically. Tor basically anonymizes your transactions, so we can't see, what you're sending, how much you're sending. If you're using a wallet that does not connect to Tor, that wallet software provider can see all your transactions.
So yeah, this is really great, and maybe for the people at home who are starting from zero, how we know how this works, but how do you actually move your keys physically from point A to point B? And then also, can you talk about what Tor is, just so people know what you're referring to? Zach or Lili, just so people know the terminology.
Sure. And I think that was a great overview from Lili. So
yeah, definitely.
Basically, you have, the way that we do it with Passport and with Envoy, or with any, and this is common to any of the software and most of the hardware wallets on the market, is that you have an app that's on your phone or your computer, and the app is connected to the internet, and the app is connected to the Bitcoin network. Mm-hmm. And so then with this software wallet, as it's typically called, you can see your balances. You can see, say, for example, that I have 1 Bitcoin stored on the wallet. You can see a record of all your transactions. And then you can go ahead and you can initiate a send in order to send Bitcoin to someone. So then once you're ready to send the Bitcoin, the internet connected device, most easiest when it's on your phone. So let's say your phone, you enter in the address that you want to send the Bitcoin to, and then your phone has to communicate some information back to your hardware wallet. So we actually use QR codes, which is really cool. So the phone displays some QR codes. Our device Passport actually has a camera on it where you can scan the QR codes. And then Passport allows you to see all the transaction details, confirm that they're correct, and then go ahead and quote, we say sign the transaction. It's a kind of a cryptography term, to cryptographically sign the transaction. Another way of saying it is like approving a transaction. So you're basically using a separate device that is not connected to the internet in any way, that's storing those private keys on the device itself, and that is going and approving or signing the transaction. And then you can send that back to the phone, and the phone can send it out to the Bitcoin network. So that's kind of a quick overview of how it works, where your keys, your private keys, are never actually touching the internet, but it's still really easy, really accessible for you to just go ahead and sign a Bitcoin transaction in a fully, we call it air-gapped, or offline manner, because, the only thing around your hardware wallet is air, right? There's no kind of wireless communications, there's no cables, there's nothing like that. Now, with regard to something like Tor, what's really interesting that Lili noted is that many or even most software wallets today, especially on iPhone, connect directly up to the company servers. So if you're using a software wallet and it's developed by whatever company or team develops it, you're connecting to their servers. And so you're trusting them that they're going to keep your information private. You're trusting them, they have details of the transactions that you're sending. They have your IP address, associated with that specific device that you're using, your phone or your computer. And so you're trusting that they're not going to go ahead and sell that data or share that data, or maybe they have great intentions, but maybe they're hacked, right? It happens all the time. Then you end up foregoing some of your privacy. So what we do by default is we connect to the internet and to our company servers using a technology called Tor, which is like a privacy preserving network. And so we have no idea, who you are. We have no idea geographically where you are. We're not forcing you to create an account or anything like that. And so we give you the convenience to be able to really easily just use a simple mobile wallet on iOS or on Android, but we know as little about you as possible, and we try to protect your privacy as much as possible. And we think about privacy as a key component to sovereignty, right? It's not enough that you're just storing your keys and having control over your funds. it's also really important that you're preserving that privacy, because you don't want to end up on the list somewhere like a high net worth, Bitcoin owner, for example.
Yep, and we just saw an example of this over the last couple of days, right? Maybe not in the case of physical device makers, but relying on a third party, outsourced data provider. If they have a security breach, it can expose a wealth of information. I mean, like I brought this with me. I don't use it anymore, but an old Ledger. I mean, not to impugn upon Ledger, but like we saw what happened there in the past, right? Like so I think it's important what you guys are trying to do, and
right.
what some of your peers are also trying to do, and figuring out like how to navigate that. So I guess with that said, maybe like taking it up a level a little bit, talking about some of the more like quote unquote advanced concepts in self-custody. So, things like seed phrases, multisig, any advanced self-custody topics, like things that you think once people figure out how to sign, custody and sign for transactions, like what's the next level up that people should be thinking about when they go down this road?
Yeah, I mean, I would say the first thing is the seed phrases are very important. They give you the access to your funds. So before setting up multisig or anything like that, they need to secure their seed phrases in a way that is not, ideally not paper. They would use something like an encrypted micro SD.
Well, okay. Well, what is a seed? People may not know what a seed phrase is too. So Lili, tell everybody about what a seed phrase actually is. And I mentioned Brain Wallet before and how that works its way in.
Yeah. So a seed phrase is like, I kind of compare it to like an account number, like for your wallet. So that's what gives you access to your funds and your money. It's not the physical device that gives you access. It's the seed phrase. So I say it's like the account number for your funds. So in the event that you lose your device, somebody steals it, it gets destroyed in a fire or incident of nature, you can recover your funds with the seed phrase, and you can recover it with a wallet that supports seed phrases. So that's pretty much any wallet. You can recover it with another hardware wallet or a software wallet. If you lose these funds, if you lose the seed phrase, then you lose access to your funds. So it's important to secure them, whether that be in steel or an encrypted micro SD. You just want to get it off that paper.
Yep. And you kind of mentioned it before, but before I lost all mine in my boating accident, I used washers and a seed plate. So I don't know, like maybe talk about that a little bit, like how people elect to cryptographically punch in the steel so as to preserve it.
Yeah, I mean, you can get like a steel plate. They're not all created equally. Like some of them are created with materials that are very cheap. They come from places that don't have good quality control in manufacturing. So you want to choose a steel plate that's been through a stress test. They've done tests where they put gasoline on it and light it up. They've like blown it up or tested it like extreme temperatures. I know one of them is like the crypto tag, where you can physically like put in your seed phrase. Ideally too, you don't want something that is very flashy. So if it has like a logo of the company that's creating these, like that can give away what it is. You want it to be very discreet. I think, real steel or titanium is the way to go if you want to go in this direction.
Sure. And I don't know, Zach, do you have anything? Do you want to add to that, or?
Yeah, I think I almost want to get it slightly higher level just about the seed phrase and just be like extremely clear about what it is, right? Where it's literally taking your private key, which obviously controls access to your Bitcoin, and you're representing it in 12 or 24 words, like basic words, like maybe one is car or something, right? And so when Lili is talking about writing it down on paper or storing it in steel, it means that you are actually writing down 12 or 24 words on a piece of paper. It means that you are using these steel plates or these steel backup products where sometimes they give you little tiles where you get like a collection of tiles where It's almost like a Scrabble box. It reminds me of
like a site. You're talking about like a
little,
cipher wheel, right? Like
yes, something
yeah,
like that.
yeah, right.
And there's some other ones too. And you're basically sliding these little tiles in where you're
I tried that.
these words down.
It drove me crazy. Like I got a cipher. I'm like I can't. So I went with the steel plate, and it was just too much.
And the other way is with the steel plate and like a punch, where they give you a tool to actually punch into the plate, where you're kind of hitting a little indent. And they have etched into the plate. They have the letters in there and numbers, and so you kind of use that as a grid to represent your seed words to make sure that you can store them. So we like to think of seed words as a little bit more of an advanced concept, because a lot of people, buy a hardware wallet, and the first thing it says when you're setting up the hardware wallet is, write down these 24 words. And they don't usually do a good job explaining to you that these 24 words represent your seed. So one of the most common, I think maybe the most common way of stealing money from users of hardware wallets is to trick you into entering those seed words into your web browser on a phishing website. And we have seen that for years. I mean, this is like the most common kind of attack. And so what we do when we're giving you a passport is we actually provide you with an encrypted, like a little encrypted micro SD card and a case for it. And we back up the seed words and other important data on the device onto the SD card. And we give you a passphrase to write down. And that way, even if you don't have to worry about, keeping this passphrase on steel or something. You can put it in your password manager or something like that, store it in a less secure way. And you have this encrypted micro SD backup of your device. Mm-hmm. It's obviously not as good as putting your seed into steel, but it's definitely a good first step.
Yep. Yeah, no, that's really important. And maybe like while we're on some of the more advanced topics, and this is, maybe we're in like the fifth or sixth inning, and this is like the eighth or ninth inning as you go through this process. But when you start thinking, when people hear the phrase multisig, what does that mean, and why is that important, and just another level of security?
I can take that one as well.
Sure. Yeah. Both of you have it. Yeah. Like, I'm curious. Both here. Yeah.
So basically, like as it works by default, when you're using a wallet on your phone or when you're using like a hardware wallet, your Bitcoin is all controlled by a single key. Just one key gives access to your Bitcoin, and so you just need a single signature in order to spend your Bitcoin. What gets interesting is if you want to either have like added layers of security, or if you want to have multiple people control the same wallet or the same set of Bitcoin. And you may want to do that because, let's say, it could be you and a spouse. It could be 3 directors of a company that want to control a company wallet, for example. You may have either multiple parties wanting to control the same set of Bitcoin, or you may want to have a more secure and robust Bitcoin setup. What you can actually do is have a multisig wallet, as it's called, where instead of needing one signature to spend, you need multiple signatures. So multisig is multiple signature wallet. And so what that means is that you may have a wallet, a really common setup is a 2 of 3, where you have 3 keys, where it could be like 3 hardware wallets where each has a key. And then you need any 2 of those devices to sign the transaction in order to send the funds. You could see why that adds security, because you can lose a device and then you can still have 2 more devices, for example, sign the funds. Or you could say, well, we have 3 members of our board of directors, and in order to send any money from our company wallet, we require 2 of them to provide signatures. And so those are just some common examples as to why you use multisig. I think it's still pretty early, but it's going to be extremely powerful. I should say it is extremely powerful. It's getting more and more wallets are starting to embrace it and use it, either in kind of the collaborative custody way that I mentioned, where you have like a group of people controlling the same amount of funds, or for the security aspect I mentioned, where you have, your funds controlled, or I should say, like your funds require multiple devices in order to spend from them. Something we're looking at for our software for the future for sure, but it's still pretty early. But what's cool about Passport is a hardware wallet is designed to work really well with all the different popular multi-sig software wallets and tools. Makes it really easy to do multi-sig transactions securely on the Passport.
Yep. I don't know, Lili, do you have anything to add to that, or any points that are important to you about multi-sig, or something we might be missing?
Yeah, I just wanted to speak about it from a more practical sense. Multisig is a very good tool for security, but it is very advanced and it comes with a lot of considerations. And one of those considerations meaning you have more seeds to back up. So every device has its own seed backup. And if you're storing all these backups in the same location, you're muting some of the benefits that you get from multisig. Another thing you have to do is you have more devices to secure. And you have to make sure to train your heirs, like people who are going to inherit your money, on how to actually extract the funds from a multi-sig setup, because the last thing you want to do is leave behind all this money to people who have no idea how to get it. They have no idea where you hid your keys. So it's very important to have very strong inheritance planning if you're deciding to go for a multi-sig setup. I don't think it's for everyone. I think it's mostly for people who have a lot of funds, but the step up from the simple securing your seed phrase is using a seed phrase plus passphrase instead of a multi-sig. So a passphrase is an additional word. They call it the 25th word that you can add on and require your hardware wallet. We require to use your hardware wallet. So it's an extra word. When you unlock your wallet, you're prompted to enter that word, and that adds a little bit of plausible deniability to your setup without having to go full steam ahead with multi-sig.
Sure. And so this is a question for you guys with Foundation, and I candidly don't know the answer to this, but do you guys do, when you're generating the seed phrase, do you guys do dice rolls or anything to introduce more, randomness into the sequence of words? How do you guys, or is there any functionality built in around that?
Sure. So we do not do dice rolls because we, as a company, are.
People probably have no idea what I'm talking about, by the way, when I say that.
I can take a step back.
Sure. Yeah. That's my fault.
Right. So, when you're using a hardware wallet, or when you're using Bitcoin, at all, and you're creating your first wallet, you don't you're given the seed words when you do the setup. But those seed words are actually generated on the device that you're using. And in order to generate them, the device is essentially creating a random number and using different sources of randomness in order to create a strong random seed phrase for you, a random private key. So what some devices do is that they just rely on these, it's called, most computer chips today have something called a random number generator on them, or even a true random number generator, it's typically called. And then that's used to create random numbers, which are then used to, we call it creating entropy, kind of like a physics term, but it's also a good cryptography term. Having high entropy is having a really good source of randomness, of random numbers. And so then you use that to create your seed phrase and your private key. Some of these wallets are using dice rolls where you as the user can actually physically take some dice at home and roll them out and enter in these dice rolls in order to add more randomness, to add more entropy, right? The thing is, though, that if you were to actually do this in the right way, you should be having a separate computer that you use to verify these dice rolls for yourself, because otherwise you have no sense that the hardware wallet or software wallet that you're using is actually properly incorporating those dice rolls in to the seed to add randomness. What we do with Passport is we actually have a really cool open source circuit design called an avalanche noise source, which I'm not going to get too technical here at all. But what's fun is that we're relying on multiple sources of entropy. We're relying on the true random number generator, on actually multiple chips on the device, But then we also have this really cool open source circuit design that adds, even more entropy when you're creating your seed. What's really interesting and differentiated about Passport is that the entire device, the software running on the device and the hardware itself is open source. So we actually post online. You can go to like our website and you can actually, if you were technical enough, or if you hired someone technical or asked someone to review it, you can review these circuit schematics, you can review the software, and you can see that Passport is actually doing what we're saying it is, and it's pulling in these different sources of randomness, creating a really strong seed phrase. Historically in Bitcoin world, there have been vulnerabilities where wallets created seed phrases for you that actually were not secure due to issues with their random number generation.
Yep.
And have caused thefts and loss of funds in the past. So it's a really good question. It's an interesting part of Bitcoin history to be, aware of that and thinking about that. The most paranoid Bitcoin users, though, whether they're using a software wallet or a hardware wallet, they're not rolling dice.
Yeah.
They are literally, they have a word list. They have the word list in front of them because there's this list you can go view online. It's the BIP39 word list. Where you can see all the different words you can use to make a seed. And they're like essentially manually picking words. So you could do that by, for example, rolling a dice and like adding up, like essentially numbering each word and having a system to like roll the dice and choose a word at random. We've also seen funny things like people printing it out and cutting up all the words and putting them on like a hat, and essentially picking your words out of the hat in order to create a seed phrase. There's a lot of that kind of paranoia going on. That kind of thing is actually mitigated by something like multisig. And I totally agree with Lili. I think multisig is something that's more advanced, more difficult to use, has a lot of complexity and nuance associated with it. But then you're not putting all your money behind just one seed phrase, right? You're using multiple seed phrases to secure it. So if for some reason there is a problem with one of them, it's okay because you require approvals from multiple devices. But like, as you can tell, and as you know, like you can go pretty deep down the rabbit hole for how to do all this kind of stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, like all the Hedgeye subs and my colleagues here are going to think I'm like, digging myself a bunker now in my backyard after hearing all this. So you're right. There's different.
Well, don't forget, you got to have, people do funny things. Like people have like these like Faraday bags, where you got to put your device in the Faraday bags so that you can't have any electromagnetic, no communication to this device while it's secure. There's a lot of these interesting things that the more hardcore Bitcoiners do.
Well, I learned the hard way. No, it didn't happen to me, but I heard stories. One of the Bitcoin conferences, someone traveling through the airport with their hardware device didn't have it in a Faraday bag in their bag. So, I guess it's a degree of paranoia, but there are good reasons to do it if you're in certain settings, right? Like if you're in home or you're just kind of like out for a walk and not around people, not a big deal. But if you're you're going to a Bitcoin conference with like, I don't know, we all know who, like with eyes on, you might want to have one. So, but anyway.
Maybe don't bring a hardware wallet with a large amount of Bitcoin to a Bitcoin conference, right? It's
exactly.
Good, which I'm sure a lot of people do not follow that advice. So definitely be careful. Yeah,
I'm with you. I didn't bring mine along because like why would you ever do that? But yeah, so I don't know. Well, anyway, listen, I want to be respectful of your guys' time because I know we're almost at 45 minutes here, but I do have a couple of questions from the viewers at home if you guys are willing. So the first, there's 4 by the way at this point in the queue. So from Rich, he said unrelated, but thoughts on the latest rise in home Bitcoin mining. How does that impact Foundation, if at all?
Well, I can speak to this. I am a home miner. I started mining Bitcoin at home around 1 year and 2 months ago. It doesn't really have an impact on the hardware wallet market, but what it does do is the more home miners there are, the stronger the Bitcoin network is and the more resilient. We saw a big outflow of miners from China after the Chinese ban. So what that did was decentralize the hash rate. So that spread, miners across the globe. And it also incentivized home miners to to keep running and like keep their ops best practices managed. So that's their privacy. It's very easy to shut down big miners. I personally believe there are still miners in China, but they are mostly home miners. Home mining is not scary. Anyone can get into it. They just need to install, the right power setup and manage their heat effectively, or put it in the basement or somewhere where they can't hear it.
Yep.
But when, miners plug in, whether they're at home or somewhere else, like, it just strengthens the network. It means that Bitcoin's going to be around and it's not going away.
Yeah. What I would add to that as well is home mining and just mining coins for yourself in general is a fantastic way to produce Bitcoin for yourself privately without having to go buy off an exchange, without having to go through all the KYC, know your customer laws. You don't have to provide your birthday, your social security number, bank statements, and all this other crazy stuff that exchanges are more and more typically asking for today. So if you are mining Bitcoin at home and you're benefiting from being able to get Bitcoin more privately, you should really be storing it for yourself. The craziest thing to do would be to actually be mining Bitcoin at home and then sending it to like a exchange or custodian, to store it for you, right? You're going to want to really use a hardware wallet and self-custody of those coins that you mine.
Yeah, don't mix with KYC Bitcoin if you want to keep it private and anonymous. That's super important. And the other thing too, Lili hit on it, but soundproof your walls too, if anybody tries it at home, because especially like if you have,
loud.
It's like a jet engine and you're, I'm like you, Lili. I have a couple running in my basement, have for a while. So I mean, it's interesting because like, you can attempt to do it profitably, but then there's also this personal satisfaction. The reason why I do it is like I like the idea of contributing to the security of the network, just like as a Bitcoiner. It's important to me. So there are a couple different reasons to do it, but you highlighted the really important ones. So okay, so 3 more here if we have time. But this is from Dave in California. From Dave, would you recommend keeping a certain percentage of your Bitcoin in a hard wallet versus a mobile app? Or like, how would you split the two or mix the two? Or like, would there be an allocated? I think what they're thinking of is like a portfolio. Like how would you allocate between the two?
I like thinking about it as how much money would you be comfortable keeping in your normal, wallet that you have in your pocket, right? Or your purse. Are you comfortable with $100 in there? Are you comfortable with $200 in there? I think for me, at least, it's a similar thing on the Bitcoin side, where if the wallet is a software wallet where the keys are purely stored on your phone, then you probably don't want to have more than, a few $100s worth of Bitcoin on there, and then have the rest in what we would call cold storage, right? On a hardware wallet in self-custody. I don't know, Lili, though, if you agree or disagree.
Yeah, I think the concept of a lot of Bitcoin is subjective, right? To some people, $100 is a lot, and some people like $1,000 is nothing. Me personally, I do it by percentage. So I keep, I want to say 90% of my holdings in cold storage, but I'm also someone who transacts with Bitcoin regularly. Like I accept Bitcoin for like services, and I use it with people to transact with. I mean, I think it's percentage based is a wise way to look at it. Don't keep more than 5-10% of that on your phone. And also keep in mind, like, that Bitcoin is only as secure as the device that it's kept on. So you want to be mindful to make sure that, your device is free of viruses and malware. I personally keep my Bitcoin wallet on a mobile device with a secure mobile OS, but that's like a whole other rabbit hole to go down.
Yeah, you can go off the rails on that rabbit hole for sure. I would say though that one thing, just from, if you're in Bitcoin for a while, if you go buy some Bitcoin, if you go put, let's say, like $100 of Bitcoin on your phone, don't be surprised when you forget about it, come back, then all of a sudden that 100 is more like 1,000, and you're like, whoa, like this is crazy. And that has totally happened to me over the years, where you have, and this is common with Bitcoiners, forgetting that they have like an app on their computer or their phone where they had a little bit of Bitcoin on it. Fast forward 4 years, and all of a sudden it's like 10x in value, and you're like, wait a minute, I need to actually move this over to more secure storage.
Yeah, there's like a point in time where you, and it's I think you guys are right, and Lili's right. It's different for everyone, where you kind of like you realize like, okay, I have to take like serious personal responsibility over this and make sure that I'm not relying like for A, get smart on the topic, B, make sure that like my security is as leveled up as it can be, and C, not rely on anyone else to handle it for you, because it's different for every person, right? Like everyone's got that like that threshold that they cross over. But here's another one, maybe two more if I think we have about 5 minutes left, so maybe we can get these last two in. Also from Dave in California, over what time horizon does it become important to keep your Bitcoin in a cold or hot hot wallet? If I plan on holding my Bitcoin for less than 3 years, would it still make sense to use a hardware wallet? I mean, I know what I think. What do you guys think? Less than 3 years.
I mean, I'd say definitely, right? Like, no matter how long you're planning to hold your funds, you want them in a secure place, and you want them easy to access. I mean, with a hardware wallet, you can like change your setup to be as like easy or complex to access as you want. Maybe if you're holding less than 3 years, you don't go for something like Multisig, but definitely keep it, in cold storage.
Mm-hmm. And
almost,
what I would say,
yeah.
I was going to say that. Sorry, Lili.
Yeah,
no, it's all good.
It's almost a full like Bitcoin cycle, 3 years.
I was going to say you're going to end up holding it more than 3 years most likely. So you should definitely learn about hardware wallets and the right way to do it. You may think you come in with a specific time horizon, and that's how I was back in the day. It was like 4-year time horizon. Then I'm going to want to move this investment into something else, right?
Yep.
And then fast forward and
well,
you become more and more of a Bitcoiner. Yeah.
There's this funny thing that happens. It's kind of like a one-way bridge, right? Like you buy a little, and then you're like this new novel thing, like I'll just get some, and then people start learning about it, and it tends to like only kind of go up and to the right, like never in reverse. It's bizarre. I've never seen anything like it, but you guys know that. Okay, so maybe last one, and so Hedgeye, like interestingly enough, Hedgeye has its roots in Canada. So our founder and one of his partners, they grew up in Thunder Bay, and after the events of, I guess what is it, like a month and a half ago now, it seems like so much has happened between now, like then and now, it's crazy. Yeah. A lot of our clients started reaching out and asking about how to procure physical Bitcoin for their clients, who are in many cases high net worth individuals, et cetera, et cetera. But this is and so it's like a constant and evolving topic here that's becoming more important. But Bill from Connecticut said, "Hi all, can you talk about your thoughts around the freezing of Canadian truckers' bank accounts? What in the world? ! What's that all about? Like, I guess what he's asking is like, how did that impact you guys at all, or about how you thought about the world, both before and after?"
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it's definitely just solidified the thesis of why Bitcoin as censorship-resistant money is important. Bitcoin is not just a hedge against inflation. It's not just a way to protect your wealth for your heirs. It's also a way for you to ensure that your wealth is actually yours. It's not confiscatable. So what happened with the Canadian truckers is they had people donate via GoFundMe. They shut down GoFundMe, and they returned that money to people who donated. But then another fund called Hong Kong HODL came about, and that's like a Bitcoin
awesome
donation
name.
only. Yeah.
Awesome name. Sorry.
No, so they accepted donations via Bitcoin. And a lot of people donated this Bitcoin from their exchange account. So they sent money from their exchange account directly to addresses associated with Hong Kong HODL. The blockchain is open and it's transparent. People have their information that reside with the exchange, so they know that that address belongs to them when they send it directly to this Hong Kong HODL charity. Then they came out and said, the truckers are a fringe minority, essentially labeling them as financial terrorists, and that their activities were illegal. So once that label is attached, the people who gave money are essentially charged with, like, I guess, aiding terrorism or supporting like an illegal cause, a cause that became illegal. So their funds got frozen in the bank because there is a rule in Canada that says if you are involved in crime, in this case donating to this charity that was labeled as crime, you are now subject to like asset seizure or asset freezing. So that's what happened, and it's very sad to think of how they handled this donation collection. They didn't educate people on the risks of, using Bitcoin directly from an exchange. That's another discussion. But the real takeaway here is the people who got their bank accounts frozen, they couldn't access their funds, they couldn't buy groceries, they couldn't pay their kids' tuition, and that just shows the value of having money in your pocket and money at home that is unconfiscatable, that you can use in the event of an emergency. In this case, it was an emergency for the people who got affected.
And if I could just briefly add just one thing to that is that, and I think I alluded to this earlier in our conversation, this could happen to you, to me. This is not someone that is explicitly choosing to donate to an illegal cause, right? This is, if any of us, I've donated to things before. If you've ever donated to a cause, it was later deemed to be illegal. And then retroactively, based on those donations, the government froze all these people's money. So you could donate to something that is perfectly legal, something that you think is moral, you think it's a good cause. It could be something partisan because the world is getting more partisan, and it seems like government's more likely to freeze assets of like the other side now, which is really unfortunate. But like this can happen to any of us. And that's kind of a wake-up call where it's really easy to just associate this kind of thing with like criminals, like terrorist financing laws that must be only used against terrorists. Until somehow you donate to something, you donate, $100 to some charity, and then all of a sudden you're being told that you donated to some terrorist, group, and now your assets are frozen. And to think that could happen in Canada, I think it should be a wake-up call for the entire Western world.
Yeah, I totally agree with you guys. And for me, I mean, well, you guys know this, but there were two takeaways for me, if I could add this. Like, Bitcoiners have been like warning about this kind of thing for the better part of a decade as being a possibility. And so it doesn't look so like tinfoil hattish anymore. And the other thing was like the threshold was $50. I mean, it's not like we're talking about hundreds, nevertheless thousands of dollars. I mean, if you donated $50, 50, that was the threshold, across which you could have essentially your assets frozen. So I don't know, just concerning, right? For a supposedly Western democracy, it's I mean, I don't want to get too conspiratorial, but it's not a good trend. All right, so anyway, this was awesome. I want to, we have about 2 minutes left, so why don't I leave you guys with the last word? And first of all, thank you. I really appreciate your willingness to do this. I hope it was just as helpful for you guys. It is no doubt for our subscribers who are new to this world. So anyway, like talk about Foundation. Like how do you want to lead people, and where should they go to learn more about you guys?
Yeah. So first of all, thank you for having us on. We had a good time today talking about Bitcoin and talking about self-custody. One thing I do want to mention is self-custody doesn't have to be scary. I know it can be intimidating, but we offer a concierge service for anyone who wants a guided experience. So in this case, our head of support will walk you through setting up Passport, updating it, moving funds, how to connect it to Envoy, as well as wallets of your choice, and how to transact. So it's a 1-hour private session that's available. We also have a code for you guys to use if you'd like. You can use code Hedgeye at checkout and get $10 off your Passport. You can hit us up on Twitter or Telegram, and we'll be happy to help you personally with any questions.
Thank you for that. That's very, very generous of you guys.
Yeah, thank you so much, Rob. It was a real pleasure to be here.
Definitely. So guys, thank you again. And I guess you guys may have heard this, but at some point we want to talk about nodes. That's like the next step in this evolution for us. So I'm sure you guys have opinions about that, but more to come there. So Zach and Lili, thank you very much. And thank you everyone for joining us.